All right, so here we go. We keep continuing here, straight in the Praia, in the Praça in Alto Paraiso, surrounded by parrots. And we got the parrots here all morning, so sorry for all the overload. We got quite some parrots shouting here. So let's start here with the 1-3 profile on the right angle cross of the laws. The 1-3. So we have the right angle cross of the laws. And in fact, what we know that this is the beginning of all law. If you look at the arms of the cross of the law that we examined in the earlier quarters, you will see that they are laws very much for their own. The laws of the mind, the laws of the form. You can't do much about fighting against Pythagoras. The moment that you get to a duality, the moment you step in there, law is something totally different. And it's the bedrock of how we live in the Maya, because the Maya is fast dualism. So law is always there to try to find some way to find security in the this and the that world. So here are the true lawgivers. They're the ones that set the framework upon which everything that we are going to do in our society depends. The 1-3 is the immigrant. It's a very beautiful line. It says, the humbleness of origin that benefits rather than restricts destiny. Obviously, that could be misconstrued in many ways. Humbleness doesn't necessarily equate poverty. And so many people will assume that when they read a line like this, what it's really all about is the law, because it's so deeply connected to our intelligence. At its very deepest level, the law recognizes that it too must somehow become aware. There's a difference between mundane law of trials and juries and the laws of awareness that recognize choicelessness, at which point punishment is moot. In other words, there's a movement here, the humbleness. At this movement benefits destiny. In other words, we start off with very, very primitive laws, very basic laws for preservation. And it's the desire to be effective and successful that build on its most fundamental strengths while it refines its nature. This refining of nature really is the core of where intelligence comes from. To understand that the splenic system is our only connection to the mammalian roots that we have biologically, and to see very clearly that the way in which that intelligence is expressed is the sophistication of a mammal in being able to devise strategies for security and in order to feed itself. The more complex the strategy, the more evident the intelligence. When you get to the Homo sapiens, you can see that our strategies are incredibly sophisticated. This is the refinement process. And at the end, you see various strategies that have bubbled into what we call the intelligence level of consciousness today. If you really strip it off the gloss, that what you get is simply an upgrade on basic survival techniques. That's all it is. Just an upgrade. We're still in the same game. It's like people were so impressed that we could send a spaceship to the moon, but then again, it's really only the extension of David bringing down Goliath. He just threw a damn stone. The fact that it takes vast technologies and all kinds of evolutionary consciousness to get to a point that we can use gas burning to fire something with gyroscopes and get it to hit the moon is only extension of throwing a rock. As a matter of fact, the very thing that goes to the moon is actually based on what has designed to be a weapon. Missiles are basically just fast stories that unfortunately have real impact. So one of the things to understood about the law is that the law starts off being primitive and must be refined. And nobody knows that better than a 1-3, because a 1-3 is going to discover right away that laws are not perfect. Oh, do they make good lawyers? You want a lawyer that's going to find a loophole? Give me someone on the cross with a 1-3, and particularly here. It's like they found out right away where the cracks are in the law. And either they're going to take advantage of those cracks or they're going to scream bloody murder about them and try to cover them up. It can be very important to get a point where the laws that you can see are honored around you and an embarrassment to you. This is the detriment of this line. In other words, one of the things about law is that primitive law can lead to intellectual embarrassment. If the law is so primitive that it does not serve the evolved level of intelligence, it is automatically going to lead to that embarrassment and going to the need to refine it. So there's a beauty here in the 1-T that's going to go through this process of finding out where the cracks are in the law. And we know very well that's going to lead to disillusionment. And in leading this to disillusionment to become a personal suffering, being martyred by what is an unrealistic primitive laws. There is an architect in there, never forget it. And here in the 50th gate, the anarchist lives, an anarchist in there. Every third line that we are going to meet here is an anarchist. here. And thank God it's here. Imagine what it would be like if every profile on the 50th gate on the cross was first line only. We'd still be back in caveman law. And I don't even want to think about what it looked like, felt like, like, quite frankly, I imagine it got cold, hungry, and deathly. I'm grateful for the 1-3s on the cross of law. I happen to be raising one. And it's so obvious to me that the law to them is something that when they're young, they challenge incessantly from this partner. But nonetheless, they challenge incessantly. They're always testing to see whether or not the law is valid. Are there cracks in the law? He's already the best lawyer in the house. He knows where the loopholes are. He's got it all figured out. Then we go to the 1-4. If you're 1-4 and you come into this cross, you take the law of the dominant influence in your life and you carry it forward. I would really love to say all kinds of wonderful things about 1-4, but unfortunately, it's so rare that a 1-4 is their own 1-4 what it takes to decondition them. Again, we're dealing with a very important cog in the wheel, this movement between the 1-3 and the 2-4. I said from the beginning that human design is for children. One of the best things that you can do is that in looking at any of the design of anyone that you work with, if they're a parent and you see the children's chart, if you come across a 1-4, you can make sure that that parent understands what kind of incredible responsibility. It's the most difficult parental responsibility we have. It's to be a parent of a 1-4 because in most other cases, and the parent, and you see that the children's child. If you come across a 1-4, you make sure that the parent understands what kind of incredible responsibility it has. It's the most difficult parental responsibility we have. It's to be the parent of a 1-4 because in most of the cases, if the parent is not self and they at least deal with the child correctly, it works. The not self parent who has a 1-4 child, you have a 1-4 that's going to bring out this foundation, whatever it gets from that, from the not self. The greatest shock for me in my development as a teacher is that fortunately I have not spent my life teaching adults. I spent many, many years teaching children. And what fascinated me was a situation where a 12-year-old would be taking a political position that truly was beyond their grasp, or taking a social commentary position in which they had no real grounding. And I suddenly realized that my own kids, what were they saying in the classroom? It was very strange to me. It happened to me here when I was on the island. I was teaching in a little country school here. As I began to teach children, I began to meet their parents, who eventually became my friends. So I suddenly kept getting these incredible flashes of the political, social philosophies of the parents being regurgitated by the children. Think about the 1-4 and a 1-3 will reject those kind of things. A 1-3 will have no problem rejecting its parents' social political stand. No problem at all. As a matter of fact, feel martyred that they don't appreciate that. But the 1-4 child is determined to carry on. That because their inherit is not finding out whether the foundation is solid or not. Their research, the investigation, how to influence the other. This is the difficulty with the 1-4. So 1-4 on this cross, their way to refinement or not, is absolutely determined by their parents. The law is right. It will always be right. It's never going to change. So the child grows up saying the law is right. It's absolutely right. It's never going to be changed. And let me tell you, because I can influence you. I know how powerful 1-4s are, which is why I have this concern, because they do have the ability to come up with the data. They're the ones, after all. And because they have this focus from the unconscious of getting the information across, unless there's something in their life that says to them, look, don't just be a parrot. This is the disease of the 1-4. They love slogans. They love to turn things into slogans. Don't be a parrot. Don't say something is true just because somebody else said he has said it's true without you knowing the truth of it. It's the only way that you can teach them. So funny that we have all these parrots around me here, right? It's just one parrot after another parrot, and everybody's shouting here. It's one big parrot show.